The opinions and suggestions expressed on the following program are solely those of the participants and not necessarily endorsed by program sponsors or any radio station, media company, or platform broadcasting this program. The following program is a product of Causeway LLC. The information in this broadcast is not intended as investment, tax, or financial advice. Matthew Moore is not a licensed investment advisor and speaks solely from his experience and opinions. All information in this broadcast is for entertainment or educational purposes only. Matthew Moore, Causeway LLC, and the company or platform broadcasting this program is not responsible for the success or failure of any person's investment decisions or purchases. Matthew Moore, Causeway LLC, and the company or platform broadcasting this program makes no and expressly disclaims all representations, warranties, and guarantees with respect to this broadcast and its sponsors. Investing in any market is inherently risky and can be financially dangerous. Invest at your own risk.
Government officials we will continue to inform as this story unfolds.
Welcome to Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore, the Bitcoin-focused radio show that's waking the masses to the fiat money Ponzi scheme. Money is changing, and your freedom is at stake. So stick around and learn how to empower yourself for this new digital age. Now, here's your host, Matthew J. Moore.
Welcome, America, and welcome, world, I should say, because, hey, we're all over the place. But no matter where you are, or what you are, or who you are, or what you're doing, I want to welcome every single one of you Bitcoin lovers, newbies, and experts, I might add. You are now listening to Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore, and yes, we are one of the only syndicated radio shows that is dedicated to that topic known as Bitcoin. We're here to tickle your fancy when it comes to this space, but it's a show where you're going to learn about things like, let's say money and freedom and history and technology, energy. Oh, gosh, it just keeps on going and going and going, because sometimes to understand really what's going on in this world and with Bitcoin, you have to understand these topics. And that's why we bring on wonderful guests. And today is no exception. And, I wanted to pose a question to you. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but have you ever thought about why the U.S. dollar is the world reserve currency? What dictates that title? How and more recently, how long does that title last? I mean, can a country hold that forever? Well, on today's episode, we're going to talk about this thing called the Petro dollar system and why we might be witnessing its demise in real time. I mean, and this, I'm not exaggerating here. We really do live in interesting times nonetheless. And as Americans, we really need to be aware and ready and understand what might just be around the corner. And on today's show, we're bringing on somebody who's been a returning guest, but it's his first time on the syndicated version of the show. But he most certainly has some very important thoughts when it comes to these recent developments on this matter. But, before I dive into that and before I bring him on, I got to make a couple announcements. I know, but it's important, okay? First of all, I don't know if you heard that awesome intro. Well, we also have an awesome outro, and it was produced by a gentleman by the name of Brian LaRue, and he does wonderful audio work, whether you're trying to mix a track, make a track, create custom music. He does it all. So if you got needs like that, go check him out at beyonduproductions.com. And I might also add, we're recording this show in Blue Studio here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's right. We are Central America, Heartland, heart of America. And Sooner Marketing Solutions is the company where this studio is based. And so if you have any marketing solutions, and I'd encourage you to go check them out, because they've got quite a list of services that they offer. That's SoonerMarketingSolutions.com. All right, well, today on the line, I'm not going to waste any more time. We're gonna have on what I would consider a real Bitcoin OG, original gangster, who has, well, probably, and this is actually a real statement, has read more about Bitcoin than any other person on the planet. His name is Guy Swann. He's also known as the Professor Bitcoin OG. Guy, it's so good to have you back on the show. For our listeners in Los Angeles, Atlanta, and Seattle who might be unfamiliar, please share a little bit with everyone who you are and what you do in your own words.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on again. It's been a while. Since we got a minute to hang out.
Absolutely.
And I'm Guy Swann. I'm the guy who's read more about Bitcoin than anybody else you know. I host the show Bitcoin Audible, as well as Bitcoin Insider, which is not nearly as often, but it's kind of like my guilty pleasure to kind of pick on like a bunch of the scams and everything in crypto. It's just a fun little side project, with Bitcoin Audible being the one that everybody knows me for, and get to go around and talk at conferences, and I teach people about Bitcoin. Main point of the show is I read, literally. Most of the shows are quote unquote reads, and I find and curate the best writings, the best in cryptography, in the history of money, in economics, in the history of the cypherpunks, the current breakdowns of the monetary system and the financial system, and read them aloud on the show, and then give guys take, quote unquote, and dig into what I think it means, and relate it back to all the other things we've covered, and try to make sense of the psychotic monetary environment that we are in today.
Some very, very important work, I might add, especially in the world of Bitcoin. And, they say knowledge is power, and that is true. And so, Guy, you actually might be the most powerful person in Bitcoin based off of all this knowledge that you're consuming.
Sure. Well said, man.
But let's do this, okay? On today's show, we wanted to cover some of the recent developments around the erosion of the petrodollar that, I think may be happening here in real time. But before we dig in with our questions, Guy, can you explain to the listeners what the petrodollar is and why we should care?
So, during the just after World War II, we went fully on the dollar as the world reserve currency system. Essentially, what happened is this was with the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944, I believe it was, and essentially what happened is the US dollar, the United States being the dominant economic power because we didn't get obliterated like most of Europe, and then also being the dominant military power in the world, essentially European currencies and largely the modern currencies of the world were going to be pegged to the dollar, and the dollar was going to be pegged to gold. And so in a sense, gold was the ultimate backing. We were trying to maintain this facade of the gold standard, but we were doing it with the dollar as the go-between. And this was a trust that the dollar was going to be pegged to gold, that this was going to be a reliable source of gold because the United States was the trusted good guy, the trusted source of monetary integrity. And that fell apart pretty quick because deficits are great, and it's great to be able to consume and buy and spend things that you can't afford. And then in the 70s, we started to have, in the late 60s, early 70s, that all started to fall apart. And the pricing to gold, this is when Richard Nixon closed the gold window. And a lot of people don't even realize this, but France actually they sent a battleship to Manhattan. Like, they sat it in the bay, in the water next to New York City, to trying to get their gold out of the Federal Reserve Bank there. And that's when Nixon closed the gold window. He said, sorry, France, you don't own any gold. You own dollars that we say are backed by gold, but you're just not getting the gold. We're keeping the gold. And that system crumbled. And that's when you had the oil shock and like all these things everybody's like talking about. Oh, there were all these crazy supply chains and there's all this stuff went crazy. No. The currency went crazy. And thus our ability to communicate value fell apart. And then you have all these supply chains issues. Money is just that. It's just a way to communicate economic goods. And that is when the petrodollar was born. The petrodollar is an agreement between us and Saudi Arabia and OPEC nations to get them to price oil in dollars and only accept dollars for oil, and then to cycle any profits back into U.S. treasuries to buy our debt from us in exchange for our military support. Wonder why we've been in the Middle East fighting a whole bunch of wars that don't really make sense for the last 50-odd years? That's why. Why are we supporting genocide in Yemen? That's why. And because we've made this agreement to support the military endeavors of Saudi Arabia And they have been buying our debt, but we've been destroying our debt. We've been devaluing our debt, and our money has increasingly become a political weapon rather than a useful tool for trade. And so we are in this weird place where we are back into a transition. We are back into the oil crisis of the 70s. We are back into that communication mechanism falling apart. Because without that artificial demand, there's very little reason to use a currency that's not friendly to you in the global environment. And that's where I think we'll get into a whole bunch of other details as to why and what's falling apart exactly.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at current headlines, current trends, things that are happening at a geopolitical level, you have the OPEC nations themselves and Saudi Arabia, they've been, obviously, like you were saying, a key part in this global demand for dollars due to the agreement that energy had to be bought with dollars. However, that does seem to be changing because Saudi Arabia's crown prince basically said that he's no longer interested in pleasing the United States and wants something in return for anything he does. And in addition to that, what I found interesting is that Saudi Arabia actually took steps to join China, which has this whole, China-led security and trade alliance, and it also lists Russia, India, Pakistan, and I think 4 other Central Asian nations as members. And what's interesting is even the Russian deputy chairman of State Duma said that Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa plan to create a new currency to challenge the U.S. dollar. I mean, again, these headlines, I could keep reading them, for hours. But I could, here's the thing that I want to ask you, Guy, is if all of these countries are teaming up against the U.S. dollar, maybe they're tired of, obviously, of the weaponization of the dollar, but America can't bomb all of them to maintain the dollar's reserve currency. So what is your take? What do you think is actually happening in real time?
Yeah, so when it was just developing world, developing countries that were threatening to leave the dollar supremacy system because they don't like being a small fish in a big pond. And they wanted to, Iraq the first time, and I think actually Iraq the second time. I forget kind of the details, but this is like something that's been kind of an ongoing trope, so to speak, with all of our wars is that was the first thing we did in Iraq is we set up a central bank, right when we put feet on the ground, basically. And this has been largely, there's a very, very thorough and convenient theory that this has been to prop up the petrodollar system. This has been to continue to force the artificial support for the dollar. When you think about it, if everybody had to get Beanie Babies to fill up their gas tank and your gas station didn't accept anything else, like even if you were still using the dollar, you'd still have a trunk full of Beanie Babies to go get gas. Doesn't matter that you don't want Beanie Babies, you need gas. That's the petrodollar system, basically. They can make you buy anything they want if they can make sure that you can't get gas without it. But that's been largely developing countries, when these are huge countries, when these are modern nations, you can't really just go start bombing those and kind of have the benefit of the doubt. It's easy to say a developing country is like, oh, they're backwards and evil and, they're brown people over there. They're doing bad things and we need to go stop them. But when it's France, still they'll demonize all of them, Russia, China, anything. I mean, not to say that they are any sort of paragons of ethics or anything. Like, they're all bad guys. It's just bad guys fighting bad guys. But in that same vein, you can't just go start a war with China. But crazy enough is our military industrial complex is so arrogant and just narcissistic, is that they just seem to not care that they are threatening what would be a horrific war. And just the complete lack of restraint over the military expansionism here is incredibly frightening. I think it was just just the other day, because of Saudi Arabia and China meeting, and there was discussions of peace with Yemen and Pakistan. Like, there's so many like Middle Eastern nations involved in this, and they're trying to stop a lot of the terrible stuff and come to some sort of a monetary agreement, which on its face seems like a pretty reasonable thing to do, but it is threatening our hegemony over there. And they sent a nuclear submarine to the Gulf over there, like just like flexing our nuts. It's like, no, you're not going to have peace. No, you're not going to stop the wars that we're in. And it's just freaky. It's just kind of freaky. But the BRICS nations are doing that. They have clearly been trying to do this. China has clearly been trying to do this for like a decade. It's really 2014 was the last time they bought net purchase of U.S. treasuries. And they had been a major buyer for decades up to that point because we were a major trade partner. And subsequently, China has become the major trade partner with like 80% of the world. They are the manufacturing center, and we aren't anymore. And I think that's actually because of the petrodollar system. I think that's because of our monetary system. I think it has profited the counterfeit class, the political class, giant centralized corporations, international corporations, at the expense of the middle class, the poor, our wages, our economic stability and security, our financial system being anything resembling a logical, rational, responsible financial system. And our manufacturing capacity. Like, it's just gutted us because we export paper.
No, that's true. I mean, we got roughly about 2 minutes before we got to go to break here. But here's the thing that I find fascinating is you even have faithful allies, like you mentioned earlier, like France now settling energy trades in Chinese yuan. And President Macron basically Macron, I think is how you say it, right, made the statement that Europe must reduce its dependence on the United States. Obviously, there's a reshuffling of the world order, and the dollar has been our number one export, in my opinion. And we, in large part, may have been exporting a lot of our inflation. But if the world stops using our dollar, I mean, don't those pigeons come home to roost?
There's kind of a lot to unpack there because I think it'll go back and forth.
Okay. Well,
in a sense, there will be a money floods in, as well as like there will be a combination of massive inflation and massive deflation, because you have to remember one of the major supporters of the dollar demand now is dollar debt. And there's staggering amounts of dollar denominated debt out there. And as debt gets paid off, as people default, money's actually vanishing from the system. So we're going to have a combination of money flooding back into the U.S., credit crises, and staggering amounts of printing and trying to prop up the U.S. dollar, the U.S. government deficit, and fund ongoing fiscal insanity, which we've gotten away with for 20, 30 odd years, but we just won't be able to anymore.
That's exactly right. Well, guys, we are getting ready to jump to break, and we got a lot more questions to cover with Guy. Hopefully you're sitting on the edge of your seat going, man, I didn't know this information, but thank God I'm hearing it now. Call up a friend, tell them to tune in to the radio, and if you're listening online, like, share, subscribe, do what you can to get the word out. We want you to be a part of the conversation. We want you to be aware and let your friends know, because some really important things might be coming down the road, and I promise you, you don't want to be, sideswiped or have the rug pulled out from underneath you. So we'll be right back. We got more great content coming right up. What does it mean to be physically, spiritually, and financially free? The right to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness, these were the ideas that made America. But what happens to these ideas when America's money becomes compromised? What do you do when the very thing that you're working for day after day is fundamentally designed to enslave you? Whether it was a conspiracy or not, you won't believe what is about to happen in this country. Arm yourself today with the truth and build your life on the foundations for liberty. Rediscover freedom in the 21st century and grab a copy of my Amazon best-selling book, Foundations for Liberty. For just $11.99, you can support this radio show by finding a copy on Amazon or by going to mattjmoore.com. Again, that's mattjmoore.com. Don't wait, because freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. Do you have a strategy to obtain Bitcoin on a regular basis? Do you plan to automate your dollar cost averaging? What about getting all or part of your paycheck in Bitcoin? GetHedge.io is revolutionizing how you get paid. Hedge makes it easy to automatically convert your pay into Bitcoin. Whether you're an employer or employee, you can get started in 4 easy steps. Start getting paid in Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Litecoin. The great part about using Hedge is you can skip the exchange experience altogether and have your Bitcoin sent directly to a wallet you control. Self-custody is key, and GetHedge is giving you the power. Hedge is here to make it easy to stack those sats month after month. Bitcoin, it's a long-term play, so what are you waiting for? Start living on the Hedge, and don't forget to let them know that you heard about Hedge from Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore. Use my referral link at mattjmoore.com, or you can go to gethedge.io. Again, that's gethedge.io.
Short-form video content is taking over social media, and with only seconds to capture someone's attention, our team can help you stand out from the crowd. At Sooner Marketing Solutions, we'll produce and publish engaging TikToks, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts. If you feel like you're falling to the wayside and missing out on the exposure that you deserve, click the link in the description to get Sooner results now.
Do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Are you being audited or investigated? Has the IRS sent you a letter demanding payment? You may not owe what they claim. Make this free call to the tax doctor now. Let them negotiate with the IRS on your behalf.
800-262-4182. 800-262-4182. That's 800-262-4182.
And we are back, America. We are back in the saddle. It's round 2 of America's Bitcoin-focused radio show. And like I said earlier, whether you just love Bitcoin, maybe you're new to the subject, maybe you think you know everything, we've got something for everybody. And so I hope you stay tuned and listen to these awesome conversations that we're having, because, yes, this is Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore. It is the one radio show that is focused on that topic called Bitcoin, where we have Bitcoin-focused conversations and talking about how Bitcoin is going to change the world, impact the world, and even you yourself. I'm telling you, there's a world of enlightenment that comes with this subject, and we talk about things like, what does money mean for our freedom, our personal freedom, our country's freedom? Is there history? Is there technology? Is there energy? How many components go into Bitcoin, understanding Bitcoin and the world that Bitcoin is trying to create? Well, we answer all of those questions every single week on this show. And today, our topic, we've been talking about this Petro dollar system. Have you ever thought about, why the dollar has been in its current position? Why is currency and monetary systems, why do they change? Is there an ebb and flow? Is there a historical pattern that we can identify? And what dictates a country having the world reserve currency status? Well, we might, as America, be sailing in some rough waters when it comes to monetary policy, and things might be changing very, very soon, in my personal opinion. So if the world starts looking extremely different, we are here to prepare you with some tools that might just help you. Today, we've got somebody who is a returning guest, a person who can most certainly speak to this topic. But before I bring him back on, I just need to make another shout out to Brian LaRue, my producer. He's not here today, but if you like what you're hearing and the product that you're hearing, he can most certainly help you with maybe a podcast, maybe a radio show, maybe a custom track, music. He does it all. Literally, you can check his work out at beyonduproductions.com. He makes sure we sound beautiful and crisp to the ear. So I want to go ahead. We're going to bring back our guest. He is what I would consider a real Bitcoin original gangster. And as we were saying in the first segment, knowledge is power. And this guy has consumed so much Bitcoin knowledge, he just might be the most powerful person in Bitcoin, because you know what? He has read more about Bitcoin than any other person in this space and even in the world. Guy, it is so good to have you back on this show. And because this is radio and because so many people are tuning in and out, they're jumping in and out of their car, please share with those who maybe have just now tuned in who you are and what you do. I'm sorry, that was my bad. I just had you on mute, I think.
Oh,
I can hear you now. I
can you hear me now?
Yes, it's my fat fingers. I'm running the board right now, and I don't have my producer.
sounds good, man. No worries.
All right.
I'm Guy Swann, the guy who's read more about Bitcoin than anybody else you know. I host Bitcoin Audible podcast, and I teach people about Bitcoin and money, economics, the whole shebang, everything about the history, and trying to make sense of all this stuff.
Well, we were talking before break. We were talking about just kind of this general erosion of the petrodollar system, and how you have these not only developing countries but even these other world powers coming together. I mean, we talked about the BRICS nations. I mean, and what they're trying to do by creating something to rival the U.S. dollar, and you even have countries like Mexico who are applying for membership into the BRICS. But obviously, there's a power struggle going on. You got China and Russia, and obviously, people, all these countries are like, well, we would love to have the power of the world reserve currency. But, I think it's important to talk about Bitcoin. And many of these countries, like I said earlier, are sick of how the United States has weaponized the dollar, hence why many of them are trying to take down the dollar. But wouldn't it be better if just these countries just move to Bitcoin? I mean, does Bitcoin become a reserve asset before maybe even a world reserve currency? What's your take on this?
Yeah, in the context of just kind of the geopolitical order that we're moving into, or kind of maybe an assessment of how it's breaking apart and where potentially Bitcoin fits in, probably my favorite read recently is by author Matt.
Oh, I think we lost you there. Well, once we make reconnection there.
10 and 7-11.
Hey, Guy, can you repeat that real quick? We had an interruption there. I'd love for you to be able to share what you were just saying there.
Yeah. My favorite piece on the geopolitical order, and essentially kind of an assessment of all the pieces at play, the big pieces at play, recently was by author Matthew Pines. And it's called The Future Geopolitical Order and Bitcoin, an Initial Assessment. And he does such a good job of aggregating a lot of like the core shifts that are happening in U.S. Treasury demand and the BRICS nations, and essentially does a really good job of laying out a lot of this in an easy to understand way. And it reads 710 and 711, 710 and 11. On the show, if you want to check it out on Bitcoin Audible. It's like 20 episodes back or so. But in the context of Bitcoin, how does Bitcoin fit in all of this? So if you ask me, does it make more sense and is it easier to go to Bitcoin? Obviously, that's a yes from my personal perspective. But I think it's important to remember that monetary networks and monetary shifts historically are very, very slow moving. It is ultimately a shift in how we think about and understand where value comes from, especially in our current environment. That for the last 100 years, we've essentially been in this weird, 150 years, arguably, we've been in this weird middle ground where there is actually no strong base for money, that we think of money as a fiat thing. Very, very strongly in the last 70 years, the heart of like the generations in the world today have grown up thinking that like money doesn't have value unless the state runs it. And that's historically nonsense. Like this is an anomaly in monetary history. But I mean, you talk about it talk about Bitcoin or whatever on Twitter. I mean, like logical, intelligent people saying that like Bitcoin can't have value unless it's issued by government. It's like, no, you could not be more ignorant of monetary history. Like government money, governments tried desperately to take over money because they had no control over it, because the money was emergent. It is an emergent technology. It's like the difference between somebody trying to engineer a language versus a language naturally emerging. It's not an easy thing to control. Like it is its own beast. The market is going to try to find the best monetary good. And in that sense, on a long enough timeline, I think Bitcoin wins. Bitcoin simply has, especially from a historical context, the strongest monetary properties and an unparalleled degree of integrity, in the sense that you can perfectly audit it. It is digital, so it doesn't suffer from the major problems of our previous monies that got us here. That you have to, like, gold is great. It has an incredible monetary tradition, and the network effect for gold is going to make it last in some sense for quite some time into the future. But it can't solve any of the problems. Like, gold is what got us here. Because we're in a digital economy, we don't use gold. We use paper tokens centralized in a financial institution that's easily capturable by a government to trade gold promissory notes, like debt, basically. Because of that, gold can't solve our problem. And essentially, gold ends up being paper again. In a world where we live in a world of software APIs and digital trade, where we move trillions of dollars every 10 minutes, gold isn't sound money. It just isn't in that environment, unfortunately. I mean, you can still buy some and hold it under your mattress, but I think that's why, with enough time, we will find some sort of monetary consensus. I don't think BRICS nations, I don't think we go to another world reserve currency of some single nation. I really don't. I kind of think the breakdown in trust in this past system and in the petrodollar system and everything is just going to create a highly multipolar world. I think we're in a multipolar world, actually. I think we're kind of already there. It just means that there's going to be a lot of movement continually. And the BRICS nations will have their little corner. The U.S. and maybe NATO. I actually kind of think Europe and the U.S. are going to be at odds. There's indications that there's some sort of a fight between who controls interest rates between the euro dollar and the domestic dollar. And that's why CME, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, is removing euro futures. And I think that's part of why we're aggressively raising interest rates, is I think the European markets have actually had control over the global interest rates in the dollar, more control than we have had. And I've covered that a little bit. I did an episode with John Vallis, and we got into what chat was that? I can't even remember which episode that was. It's pretty recent in the Bitcoin Audible feed. But basically, there's a lot of things at play. It's such a huge, complex structure with so many different players and so many different interests and motivations and things, where any decision is going to help in these two different ways and then hurt in these ways. Like, there's no clear path out of any of it. And I don't think anybody has any idea what's going on. Right. Like, China doesn't know, Russia doesn't know, the US doesn't know, NATO doesn't know, the European Union, nobody knows. Everybody is just working in the fog of war and trying to scrape together any sort of power or wealth that they can out of the changing system as fast as they can. And this is why France is meeting with China. This is why Russia. This is why a lot of people are leaning on China, because they are the large trade partner right now. And they have made huge foreign investments and control a lot of Africa and, infrastructure and stuff. So it's it's a mess. It's definitely something to explore with hours and hours of content if you're interested.
Well, no, I agree with your take on it here and how chaotic things are kind of becoming. And what I find interesting is, I'm sure you're familiar with this as well, but, fiat currencies, if you look historically, typically have an average lifespan along with the title of a world reserve currency. A country holding that is roughly 80 to 90 years. And it seems that these, even though we may not expect to know what happens, history doesn't necessarily repeat exactly, but it often eerily rhymes, as many have stated. But I find it fascinating that these macro trends are kind of converging at the same time when you look at the timetables of what's been an average, and then these other countries kind of coming together, cobbling stuff together, and then you have the emergence of Bitcoin and more people talking about going back to gold and silver. And so there's all these different conversations going on. But in the midst of chaos, a lot of times people like to be opportunistic. Do you think that the governments and central banks are going to use this time period to try to usher in, I don't believe they'll be extremely successful, but try to usher in a central bank digital currency?
Yeah, they already are.
Okay.
I think, you know, it's an attempt to re-grasp at some semblance of control. I think what everybody's aware of, at least from a political, like geopolitical perspective, is that the current order is not working and it's falling apart, and everybody's vying for power in whatever is going to replace it. And like I said, I'm not 100% sure there's going to be any one thing that replaces it for quite some time. But that's why we have the European. That's why we have I think, the Federal Reserve and everybody trying to talk about CBDC. That's why we have the yuan and is it the renminbi? What do they actually refer to their CBDC? I can't even remember which one it is now.
Yeah.
Do what?
No, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Gotcha. But I think we're going to see a lot of, I mean, this is why, the term CBDC, everybody's talking about it. And the IMF is trying to do this is what they've done with SDRs. And it seems like they're making another push to basically turn this into something more concrete. But these special drawing rights is what they've been using kind of as a workaround for some time now, and I think those are going to increase. And everybody's trying to like have it like backed with a basket of commodities and all of these things, which I think is just kind of, it's funny because I think that's kind of ignorant as to the purpose and reasons that money works. That's a whole discussion, and that's a 5-hour lecture in Austrian economics.
I mean, here's a question that a lot of people are probably thinking is, we're talking about all these massive changes when it comes to the world order and monetary system. What does this mean for every American? What do we as Americans need to be doing? Can you give us a little bit of hope?
Yeah. The bad news is our debt is going to implode. We are probably going to be printed into this is not the good news part yet. We're going to be printed into monetary oblivion, I think. And if we don't, then our credit problems are going to be that much worse, and we're going to have bankruptcies and all of these terrible, terrible transition pains. However, what is essentially collapsing is the system that has gutted our wages, that has caused the rich to get massively wealthier at the expense of the poor, that has gutted our manufacturing base and our dependence or our independence from and our production capacity, and has supported this culture of I should get everything that I want just for the virtue of being alive, and I shouldn't have to work or do anything. Like this degradation in our culture, that nothing that we do is meaningful at all. This nihilism is a consequence of the fact of looking at people who are insanely wealthy that don't seem to have any connection to what they produce. It's just like finance bros and gamblers in this huge political stage that seem to be making billions of dollars. How could you not be nihilistic? How could you work day in and day out, like blood, sweat, and tears, and trade off, and get your kids, get your kids some braces or whatever, instead of being able to go on vacation or take 3 days off of work, and to make those sacrifices and get the car that actually makes sense for you instead of the car that you want, and have to constantly make repairs, like the pain and struggle of life, and then see somebody just print trillions of dollars and send a bank into bankruptcy and then get a bailout, get a freaking bonus. How could you not think it was all meaningless? That's falling away. The thing that makes that possible won't be possible anymore. Yeah, economic reality is going to come back and punch all of those people in the face. Something fierce, because we've been lying to ourselves for about 30 years, at least. And so the good news is the bad news is we're going to have a really bad surgery. We're going to have a really bad recovery. We're going to have a really, really bad hangover, because we've been on economic drugs, just cocaine and alcohol like crazy for a long time. The good news is we're going to wake up and we're going to be sober.
1 minute.
And the cancer is going to be gone. and we're going to actually be able to heal again. But it does mean that a lot of what we have in the meantime, it means get assets. It means get something that's outside of the U.S. financial system. Bitcoin, obviously, being that's my safety boat. That's my life raft. I can't imagine being aggressively tied to the fate of the U.S. financial system right now. Like, for the little bit that I have in a bank account, I just get nervous. Like, I really worry about like another SVB. Like, tomorrow morning, am I going to be able to ACH out of that bank account? I don't know. I just don't know. So you need to protect yourself. And unfortunately, there's not like a simple answer there. It's learn a lot about what is going on. But I think you can. Historically, we've been through a lot worse. Humanity is a resilient jackass. Like it just, like, we have been through utter hell.
Right.
Like, we went through World War I and World War II, like the founding fathers.
Well, we got to go. We got to run to break.
We can do it.
We got to run to break, but we'll be right back with Guy Swann with great content. The sun, beaches, parties, education, and Bitcoin. This is the recipe for Bitcoin 2023, the largest Bitcoin conference in the world. Ever thought about meeting industry experts? It's the who's who of Bitcoin, and you can't miss it. Join us in Miami, Florida for the annual Bitcoin conference. Use my promo code BTC Radio at checkout. That's BTC Radio. Learn more at mattjmoore.com.
Okay, I'm talking funny because I'm in the witness protection program. I have too much credit card debt and I don't want people to find me.
Okay, I'm just kidding. We're going to talk about credit card debt. Right, those plastic things that we all have in our wallet. Are you in your 50s or 60s and you're still carrying around a mound of credit card debt? Wouldn't it be nice to start banking that money and save a little money for retirement down the road? We help people restructure their credit card debt all the time. We show people how they can get out of credit card debt in months, not years. Listen, you'll be carrying around credit card debt for the rest of your life unless you deal with it right now. We offer a free consultation so you can learn how you can finally wipe out your credit card debt and start saving money. Give us a free call right now.
Call Debt Solutions Network now. 800-593-0298. 800-593-0298. That's 800-593-0298.
Do you have a strategy to obtain Bitcoin on a regular basis? Do you plan to automate your dollar cost averaging? What about getting all or part of your paycheck in Bitcoin? GetHedge.io is revolutionizing how you get paid. Hedge makes it easy to automatically convert your pay into Bitcoin. Whether you're an employer or employee, you can get started in 4 easy steps. Start getting paid in Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Litecoin. The great part about using Hedge is you can skip the exchange experience altogether and have your Bitcoin sent directly to a wallet you control. Self-custody is key, and GetHedge is giving you the power. Hedge is here to make it easy to stack those sats month after month. Bitcoin, it's a long-term play, so what are you waiting for? Start living on the Hedge, and don't forget to let them know that you heard about Hedge from Cryptocurrency with Matthew J. Moore. Use my referral link at mattjmoore.com, or you can go to gethedge.io. Again, that's gethedge.io.
Short-form video content is taking over social media, and with only seconds to capture someone's attention, our team can help you stand out from the crowd. At Sooner Marketing Solutions, we'll produce and publish engaging TikToks, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts. If you feel like you're falling to the wayside and missing out on the exposure that you deserve, click the link in the description to get Sooner results now.
And we're back, America. Yes, it's round 3, ding, 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 of America's Bitcoin-focused radio show. We are one of the only syndicated radio shows dedicated to that beautiful topic known as Bitcoin, and hopefully, just hopefully, we're convincing you of some very important information, and maybe you're already a believer in Bitcoin. Maybe you are a hater or maybe a skeptic. You know what? I welcome all of you, and if you are offended by what I'm saying or what we're talking about, you can most certainly type out a carefully typed out insult to me. I'd be more than happy to read it. You can email me. Go to my website, mattjmoore.com. But we're here to share the good news of Bitcoin and what it means for your liberty, for your money, for your for history in general. I mean, technology is obviously an important part of it too, but The question that we are posing today is, have you thought about why the dollar is the world reserve currency in the first place? How did we get that title? And why have we milked these privileges so much that now the world is kind of turning their back on us? So today's episode, we've been talking to a guest who knows quite a bit about money and Bitcoin, and he's probably one of the most knowledgeable people when it comes to Bitcoin in the space. On the line, his name is Guy Swann, and like I said earlier, he is a Bitcoin original gangsta, if you don't know what OG means, but I like to call him, and other people like to call him, Professor Bitcoin OG, because he's just done so much reading on the subject matter. And Guy, I know because this is radio, like I said earlier, we've got people tuning in all the time, and we love it because we want you to stay, keep that dial tuned. But Guy, share with everybody who's just now listening what you are and who you do, or what you do. Sorry.
Yeah, I teach Bitcoin, man. That's what I do. I've been in it for 10, 11, holy crap, 12 years.
That's a long time.
I think it has been that long. And I read and cover everything that you could possibly imagine around it. That's what I do on Bitcoin Audible. Bitcoin Audible is my main avenue. It's a podcast, and I do some like meme crafting. I was a filmmaker. Film was my trade before Bitcoin took over my life and sucked me down the black hole of the the Bitcoin universe. But yeah, if you're trying to figure out anything about Bitcoin, you're trying to make sense of things. Actually, I've got a new basics series in the episode lineup, so that's actually a really good place to start if you're new to Bitcoin.
Where would they go to find this stuff?
Any podcast app.
Okay.
You'll search the specific basics episodes. You'll notice each episode is labeled as either a read, where I'm reading an article and covering stuff, Guy's take, where I just kind of like, I can't find something specific to cover, and so I just kind of rant for an hour or so, and then chats, interviews, and basics. So you'll just look through and see the basics. That really is a good place to start. I've gotten a lot of feedback on it, and I've been trying to cater that to a lot of people, specifically for newbies.
Yeah, no, I love it. Well, before we got to break, we were talking about what people can do as we kind of navigate this monetary change and shift in our lifetime. And I think the general thesis is, there's a lot of things people can do, but the core idea is hard assets, things limited in supply, because as this bubble of liquidity bursts, all those dollars go racing to things limited in supply. So, Guy, let me ask you this: do you think that as the dollar continues to fail, and we kind of see this erosion take place, do you think that the federal government becomes maybe hostile to the on and off ramps into the Bitcoin ecosystem?
They are already. But there's only the beauty of what is left of the American Republic is that, and particularly with the way trust has broken down, in particular since the pandemic, is, man, the approval rating and the trust in the Federal Reserve, or in the federal government, excuse me, is about as low as it has ever been. It's like everybody there's this huge pushback culture of just like, I'm sick of this crap and I don't want to play this dumb game anymore. Like, this is just bad reality TV. And we're all suffering for it. And I think we're going to increasingly see, especially as the geopolitical sphere breaks apart, we're going to see states break apart as well. In the sense that, like, being a prime example, Texas is just going to say, no, we're not doing that when the federal government, makes a law. And I think we'll see a lot more of that. In fact, it's funny, there's like a lot of quiet states that have already started to push back that haven't gotten a lot of attention. Like, I think Florida and Texas are probably like kind of the prime example, but people haven't taken a lot of attention to South Dakota and Wyoming, right, that are basically like, South Dakota never really locked down anything. They didn't force any, South Dakota was like a different country. Right. And their governor, I can't remember her name, but Christie, she's based. So I think we're going to see a lot of this sort of thing happen. And I still think there will be a lot of refuge within the United States, right, but there will be places to avoid like the plague. Yep. And it will probably look like they are conquered by the plague. San Francisco being a quite visible example right now.
Right.
But yeah, Operation Choke Point 2.0, which was done to try to squeeze, like legal marijuana and porn and sex work and stuff out of the financial system, by just, the more it centralizes, the easier it is to extra legally persecute people. And that is what we're doing now. Where Operation Choke Point 2.0 is trying to get that for crypto and Bitcoin. That's what Signature Bank was, and that's why there's going to be a lawsuit, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Signature Bank wasn't even solvent, and regulators just took them over because they're a massive crypto bank, and I think they just used SVB as a prime opportunity to exert control. And they're going to keep doing that, but Bitcoin is resilient as hell. And my worry would be to get out of the financial system as fast as possible. And how do I, if say they're trying to choke Bitcoin, like Bitcoin is a completely global and liquid asset.
Right.
I would be more worried about being trapped in the dollar financial system than in the global Bitcoin environment.
Right.
So I think they're doing the wrong thing. I think they're banning themselves from Bitcoin, not banning Bitcoin from the financial system.
Exactly. Well, we got a couple minutes before we're going to close out the show, but I am going to be down in Miami here next month for the Bitcoin 2023 conference, covering it as a.
Oh, we should get together, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm coming down there covering it as press, and I have a blast every time I come. But getting together with like-minded people who are literally changing the world, and I mean, it's amazing because one of my favorite things is just to spend my whole time in the trade hall just talking to people, because I mean, I love I love the education, but it's all recorded, and how many times do you get to be in one room with everybody in the Bitcoin space? So it's a lot of fun. So you're going to be there. What's you got any plans?
Unfortunately, I'm going to be trying to get in and out as fast as possible, especially on the back end. My son's birthday will be like the day after, so I want to get back in first birthday. But I will have a day or two ahead of everything. And I got a bunch of panels that I'll be doing, and I think I'll be on the desk, whatever the live desk thing, a number of times. I don't really know my schedule yet, but I'll be around doing a lot of things.
That's awesome, man. Well, I'm excited about it, and I'm going to let everybody know if you want to go and you want discounts on your tickets, you can use my promo code BTC Radio at mattjmoore.com. Tickets, the prices keep going up, so I would encourage you to hurry and go check that out if you want to come attend the best conference in Bitcoin, one of the biggest ones, I would say. Guy, please tell people if they enjoyed your thoughts and your perspectives today, where can they find you? What kind of website can they go to?
The website is still a decent resource at bitcoinaudible.com. But mostly I leverage everything from the podcast feed because you can get it from, anywhere. And we're doing a lot of overhauling on the website in the back end. So it's not like phenomenally up to date. It's easier to find the feed. But yeah, just go to Bitcoin Audible. On Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Castbox, Spotify, whatever, wherever you listen to podcasts, and scroll through. You'd be surprised if you wanted to learn anything about anything around Bitcoin. There's some.
Well, that was our show today. I hope you guys tune in next time, same place. We'll see you then.